Okay, we're going live, guys.
Okay, yeah, it's live. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Boye.
Bonjour.
Everyone, we have two well-respected IFA practitioners here in North America. One is located, Oba is located in the Fort Lauderdale region of America, and Mr. Jerome is in the GTA Toronto area. What I wanted to speak to you gentlemen about was a lot of misconception when it surrounds Ifa, the religion of Ifa. I don't think people understand fully what it is, and because there's a lot of fragmentation of people took certain little parts of this during the slave trade. Some turned it into what we call obia, and obia does not necessarily mean something negative. It's misunderstood. So I want you gentlemen, if you can tell us a little bit, where did Ifa originate from?
Clyde, and just before we start, can you go to my page and share it to your page? Because again, there's still a little problem with bringing your timeline up. Facebook, you have to excuse us, everybody. Facebook is giving us a little bit of trouble in terms of sharing these videos.
But it's live on my page.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me just actually let me check. Oh my God, my computer is out. Okay. Just 1 second, okay? Let me just check. Give me a second.
It's not live on your page, Clyde. You have to share it manually for a moment. There's something wrong with the security setting.
Okay, so I have to go to your page?
Yeah, just go to my profile and just share it off the profile. It's going live on my profile. Baba Faseye, you can do the same as well if you like.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, so we're live.
All right.
You checked it?
Yeah,
I'm live.
Checking now. And we're good to go. All right.
Okay.
Sorry, all right.
Clyde,
Sorry, no problem. So we'll just start again. Clyde, if you could just repose that question and,
okay.
And welcome to everybody.
All right. In the Caribbean, there's a lot of, I think, misguided beliefs when it comes to the religion of Ifa because of its offshoots, things like voodoo, obia. You know, people think it's a negative thing. It's been taught that way. So I want a little clarification in regards to where did Ifa begin, you know, and how it came to the Western world, and how it transformed itself, or if it's still in its original form that it left with. So who's gonna go?
I'll get Oba.
Crack at it?
Yeah, you take it. You take it, my friend.
Okay. So I'll just give a brief overview. Ifa is, many people refer to Ifa as the wisdom of nature. So Ifa is so obviously it's a spiritual system based out of West Africa. It's a system that deals with various forms of divination, herbalism, different forms of medicine. There are many stories in the oral history of Ifa that say, and depending upon who you ask, some people will say that Ifa is 10,000 years old. I've heard some people say it's 15,000 years old. The truth is, and this is just my own opinion, we don't really know for an exact fact how old Ifa is, because Ifa is considered to have been around since the beginning of, since before even humanity, before even human beings, even were brought here to this earth, before, this earth was populated. From the beginning of creation, there had always been the system of what we know of as Ifa. So Ifa is like a binary code system. It's like, you know, some verses of Ifa, and some Babalawos will say that Ifa was the first computer system that was devised by Orunmila, right? Who's considered to be like the prophet of Ifa. They call him Ibekedradamari. They're basically saying that Orunmila is the one who witnesses destiny or fate that human beings had, the things that we chose, that we were here to do in this lifetime before we incarnated on the earth. So we don't really know how, exactly for a fact of like, well, how long has the universe been in existence? You know, science says the universe has been in existence for millions
2 billion, 2 billion years.
Right, it's infinite, right? So, you know, when we talk about things like this, my belief is that we can really talk about these things really from our perspective, from our viewpoint about, you know, from where we realize that the origins of humanity came. You know, every culture, every tradition, whether you're Chinese, if you're you know, if you're Indian, you know, depending upon what part of Africa you're coming from, you know, Native American people, everybody has an origin story of saying how human beings came here to the earth, you know, and saying, hey, we're the original peoples, we came here first, and so on and so forth. But at least from the West African Yoruba perspective, they say that Ifa it predates even what we know of as Christianity. And they'll say that it even predates what we know of as Islam. Like it's always been in various forms and various stages, you know, different priests, different seers, different sages, you know, we're able to codify this information of what we know of as Ifa and create this corpus. You know, many verses and many elder Babalawos will say that some people were at such a level of attainment or of, you know, God consciousness or realization, whatever term a person uses. I'm just using just general terms that people here in the diaspora understand.
Yeah.
We get into Yoruba terms, people don't always understand what those things mean. If you don't know the language, it doesn't have the same meaning for people over here as it does in West Africa. So just to try to connect it to what we understand of it over here. Some people say that Ifa deals with various signs and symbols that are veiled in allegory, just meaning it's describing the human condition. So a verse of Ifa may say, hey, once upon a time, such and such person came for divination because they had this particular situation in life, and this is what they used in order to be able to address whatever was occurring at that time. They made this sacrifice, what we call ebo. You know, they made this particular offering. As time went by, and you know, and we know this historically, hundreds of years ago, Africans were brought over from West Africa and enslaved and brought over into the diaspora. You know, people were brought over to Cuba, people were brought over to Venezuela, to Brazil, all throughout the Caribbean. And so what we knew of as Ifa migrated over to those places, and it evolved and changed. You know, even if you go to West Africa, if you go to places like Ghana and other places, some people call it Ifa, some call it Fa, some call it Efa, Afa, Eva. It just depends upon where you're at, the dialect, you know, the particular region. We're still talking about a West African system, but everybody kind of practices it in different ways, which is why I'm remiss to say exactly the timeline, because depending upon who you ask and what part of West Africa you're in, everyone has sort of a different perspective and a different story about how it all came about. Some places say Fa is like an ancestral knowledge that was passed on, you know, that it's like it's an ancestral deity, what they call the Fa. You know, that they'll say that priests who are Bokono will go into possession with that. In Yoruba, they don't have that perspective. So it kind of depends on how you look at it. But as the tradition spread over and it migrated, it evolved and changed. You know, this is what happens, right? So you have enslaved Africans that found themselves here throughout the Caribbean. Things were different. The practice was different. Maybe they didn't have access to the same materials, the same resources, same herbs, same plants. Maybe even some of the animals and livestock that were there were not exactly what they were finding in West Africa, and even throughout Central Africa, because you had Congolese people that were also brought over as well. Like, it wasn't only Yoruba people, you had many different ethnic groups of Africans that were brought over here. And then it changed over time.
Yeah, I noticed the tree. One of the magical trees in West Africa, I think, is the babor. But in my country, because we don't have the tree, they use something called the silk cotton tree. It's always an ancient looking tree. It's always the oldest tree. It's ancient. it tends to have magical properties. In Brazil, I think they use the same tree in Brazil. The roots are powerful. You can use the bark, the leaves, even the dust around the tree itself.
Absolutely.
These magical properties. Even in Palo, when the guys are becoming like sorcerers, powerful sorcerers, they have to sleep there under the tree, under that tree. Yeah, and then bury the clothes in the graveyard, and then they get the pot, the magical pot. And yeah, and that's where they draw the powers from.
Yes.
So it's always interesting that it goes back to the tree. And another thing that you mentioned was a lot of these people, when they were brought over there, they also got separated. So people with different dialects were mixed in to cause chaos. So they had their idea of their religion, and then they met Native Indians in the Caribbean. They also had their magical system, or religious system, and everything was intertwined. But what you do find, even when you look at when I look at the histories of people from around the world, they have a similarity. They all speak about a great flood that once took over the earth. They speak. When you really pay attention to the traditions, you have so much in common. You know, it leaves you wondering. You know, where did it all begin?
It's true. That's very true. Everybody has this.
Yeah.
You know, always, many world cultures have some sort of story of some sort of flood legend or some great event that happened in mankind's history where, a large amount of life was taken. There was some sort of flood, some sort of deluge, and then there was sort of a complete global reset, as it were.
What I find fascinating about the Ifa religion, that's different to a lot of other religions, is that it doesn't depend on having like a power structure of a church, the head of an organization. It seems to empower the individual, bestow the power on the individual himself, give him that power, and which is will be frightening to people who like control and stuff like that, because it enlightens the people. Because I always wondered, your slave master brings you over here, right? He doesn't want you to read, he doesn't want you to write, because these will empower you. So he also wants to strip you of your religion and gives you a new religion. But why would he give you a religion? Why would he give you something if it will empower you? He's not going to give. I can't picture him giving me something that would empower me. You understand? And it's also, I always wondered how easily the slaves were able to fit their gods, their saints, into the Catholic Church's own saints and match them. And when I do look at the religions, I find that the Catholic saints have the same traits as the saints of Yoruba. They basically have the same, they represent the same forces of nature as in Yoruba. That's one. The other thing is Yoruba has been one of the first religions to recognize Ifa, to recognize a one God, the single God. So there's a God, in the Bible there's a God, but you can't approach him. You must go through his intermediary, which is his son Jesus. In Yoruba, there's a God, but you can't approach him directly. You have to go through his saints.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a lot of similarities here. So you wonder where, and a lot of the stories you hear, what was the first capital Ifa was, when Ifa came, when the god?
Ile-Ife. Ifa is said to have come into Ile-Ife.
That's in Nigeria.
The capital, yes. The spiritual capital of the tradition is Ile-Ife.
Correct.
So Ifa is said to have descended there. Ile-Ife also means like the house of love or the house of expansion. So, the Yoruba, again, this is oral history. The oral history is saying that the tradition began in Ile-Ife. Again, depending upon where you go, different villages you go, some people will say that Ifa may have started in other places besides, what we know of as today, as currently as Ile-Ife, may have perhaps been in a different location or in a different region of West Africa than what we currently know of today.
And speaking to that, if I may as well, like one of the things that, for instance, in Cuba, and you'll see also in Brazil and as well, in Cuba, in the Afro-Cuban basically practice of Ifa Orisha, there was, for two major reasons, a dichotomy between Orisha practice and Ifa practice.
Mm-hmm.
And quite often, it's surviving till today, there was always a bit of tension between the Orisha priests and the Ifa priests. Some attributed that, and even when my mom was alive, my mom was a researcher with Don Fernando Ortiz, and she interviewed as part of a project from UNESCO to map the linguistic and the religious history of the African slaves that came over, and was the basis of those beliefs. That there was always, the word, the land of Orisha and the land of Ifa. There was always that dichotomy that existed in Cuba. To such extent that quite often, depending on who your first padrino or religious mentor was, whether if the person was an Olorisha or somebody who had Ifa, in other words, who's an Ifa priest, quite often the language used was when you're doing a hand of Orula or divination, was part of the process was to ask your then guardian angel if the guardian angel and also your guiding spirit would give you permission to go from the land of Orisha to the land of Ifa. And many references in our Odus, in the Odus as captured in the Afro-Cuban text, make again that dichotomy between Ifa and Eshu on one side and Orisha on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, in Benin, in the through much investigation, work, and publication with Bokono Daniel Dafoji, even in Fagbasa, which is the Fa, the lineage of Fa practice in especially Abomey, they have as well a little dichotomy between the Vodou and between the Fa. In other words, there's a lot of evidence and a lot of cultural, scriptural evidence to show that Fa came into the region, okay, the knowledge of Fa and Eshu into the region, where in the Nigeria under the Yoruba, they would practice Orisha, which is in a sense a form of deified ancestor.
Mm-hmm.
And in Benin and in Togo, they would practice their core belief system was Vodou, the ability to connect with the spirits of nature and of creation.
Mm-hmm.
So already there we have, not just something that happened in the diaspora, but already coming from all the way from West Africa, we see a division. Currently, Baba Oba Faseye and ourselves have been talking about, there's even today much controversy because the Alafin of Oyo and Asa Orisa and Paula Gomez and all that have been had an active campaign to even so far as to write a royal edict that Ifa came from another land, and that the true religion of Oyo, the true religion of is Esin Ibile, Orisha Ibile. In other words, that it's based on Orisha and the cult of Shango and the other Orishas. So these stories, these are not things that are, came up in the diaspora, but you're seeing almost an ancestral, a very ancient division and conceptual argument that is resurfacing, and it resurfaces in different lands, and causes a lot of division and consternation, right?
The Fa is a lot of practitioners in Angola. Oh, so the Brazilians, a lot of the Brazilians were taken from Angola.
That's right. So so in Candomblé, many of the religious in Candomblé it has a similar genesis, if you will, in terms of, again, a synchronicity, syncretization between the Catholic Church in order to survive.
Yeah.
They called it Candomblé. The only thing is Candomblé had definitely the influence, a strong influence from the Yoruba in terms of Ki Orisha. You know it by the names, by the language, by the ceremonies.
Right.
But it also, depending on the terreiro, in other words, the religious house, you will also find influences in language and ritual and in also divinities from the Bantu, from the region of Angola, and Bantu-speaking nations would be Angola, Congo, Zaire, even in Bantu all the way to Mozambique as well, and all those areas where there's both a strong Bantu, but also even a little bit of Arabic influence. And you can say also by the use of certain terms when speaking to their prenda or their enganga, which they use from those other terms. So
the prenga is the magical pot, right?
Which in Western terms we call it the magical pot. Yes.
Yeah, the magical pot.
Yes.
Pot. Regarding the Brazilians, they seem to have kept it's really big in Brazil right now, and also Ifa is one of the fastest growing religions in the West, in North America. I noticed that they have figures up to like 5 million people now, 5-6 million.
It's quite large. Actually, the compendium of the let's say Ifa, West African belief system, so Ifa, Orisha, Vodun, whether we also call it in the diaspora Santeria, Candomblé, this compendium of the belief systems represents the 6th largest belief system in the world globally. We're talking about globally well over 200 million, 100 million to 200 million adepts by now.
Wow, that's a large number. And the thing about this in this world is that everyone has a religious system. Everyone believes their system is the right one. Some people, even in Christianity, they share the same book, but they have about 100 different sects. Everybody take one paragraph out of context, or they don't put much emphasis on it. And all right, mine is better, yours is not that good, you know? Right. What I noticed again about in my studies about Ifa was that something called Ifa table, the table of Ifa. And when a child is 8 years old, I think, they put them on the table and they're able to calculate when different things will come into his life, all the way to his death, I think. Is that possible?
So the table you're referring to is what we call in Yoruba, we call that the oponifa. It's a wooden board that we use for divination. I'll show you what I mean here. This is an oponifa. This is the table. You know, in the Cuban tradition, they call it the tablero, right?
Tablero, yeah.
So it's okay. So it's we're referring to the same thing. Usually, this particular ritual that you were referring to is a ceremony that we call Santeria. Santeria just means first steps, and that ritual is generally done on the 3rd day of a child's birth, day 3. So the first steps, meaning the first steps of the first imprint of this child on the earth. Now that they've been born, we want to see the quality of their birth. So we take the feet and we place it on the opon to symbolize that now they've come from the spirit realm, they've incarnated here now physically in a physical form. You know, we recognizing that in Ifa, they have a concept they call reincarnation, which is what they call atunwa, right? Which is the concept that that people are incarnated back and forth within various family lines. So sometimes you may hear words like Baba Tunde or Yeye Tunde, which means the father returns or the mother returns. So, for example, maybe you have someone in your family and you go to some sort of gathering or get together and everybody says, you know, your son reminds me a lot of your great uncle, so-and-so, get the same thing, eat the same food, same traits, same mannerisms. Like I feel like I'm looking at a spitting image of them.
Yeah.
From the Yoruba perspective, from an Ifa perspective, because I want to get universal out of this, because we're talking about Ifa, we're getting outside of just the Yoruba perspective, because a lot of traditions have their variation of what we can call Ifa, because Ifa is universal wisdom. So we can talk about Ifa from a Yoruba perspective or Ifa from a universal perspective, which makes it even broader and has much more far-reaching application when we look at it from that way. So in divination, the divination may very well say this child that we're reading here in Santeria is that incarnated uncle that came here and decided they wanted to come back in so-and-so's family, and this is what their destiny is. These are the things that they're here to do. These are their strengths. These are some of their weaknesses. These are some of the things they might find themselves, some of the challenges in life they might find themselves experiencing. These are certain taboos or certain restrictions, things that they should be mindful of. So usually this ritual is done with friends and family there to witness it, because there's always been a concept in African culture that says it takes a village to raise a family.
Yeah.
Well, we coin that term to say it's an African term, but really, I think most cultures all have a similar perspective and understanding that says you need to have family and friends and people who are close to you, who care about your family and your loved ones, to be there to support. In other words, there needs to be an extended network to help raise our children in an appropriate manner so they can become good members of the society that they live in. So the Ifa will tell us, hey, this person, they're here to do this. This is what their mission is, so on and so forth. So it'll tell us that through a particular Odu or a sign that'll be chanted and it'll be prayed. And then the community also will have an opportunity, other members who are there to witness what's going on, to also speak their intention and their prayers and their good wishes for that child, the things they want to see to manifest for them. Now, there's kind of an implied understanding that everybody who's there throughout this ceremony is all going to have an active part to support one another with raising this child. In other words, it's not just a random event where just anybody can come. We want to invite people that are all kind of having an agreement that they're all going to help to make sure that this child fulfills its destiny. Now, the only thing I will say is a little bit different is this particular ceremony, Santeria, is done immediately upon a child's birth. There's another ritual and ceremony called Ishefa. Some people call it Kofa, and some people call it Awofakan. Again, we're just talking about the hand of, which is a hand of Ifa ritual.
Yeah.
That ceremony usually takes place if somebody hasn't received their Santeria. The next step after that would be something we call Itefa or Tefa or Ifalodun, depending on if it's a man. That ceremony generally will tell us what a person's full life destiny is, all the things they're here to do. Like the Santeria gives us a big view of all the things that's going to happen. Once we do the full initiation, and say, for instance, into the priesthood of Ifa through Itefa, that's when we're really like seeing what incarnation of a Rumila or what incarnation of this particular Odu is this person. And that particular ceremony will tell us everything from their life, from that point of initiation all the way going forward. Mm. It's a little difficult to say that one initiation or one ritual will tell you everything from birth to death, because everything changes. Everything is always fluctuating. Nothing ever. We live in a world where the only constant is change, which is why many people who are within this faith are constantly engaged in some form of divination on a regular basis. That's why you'll see in Ifa they have calendars and things like that. Like every so many days, they check back in through Ifa or through Orisha or whatever they're initiated to, just to kind of take a glimpse and see if anything has changed and figure out what you have to do.
Yeah, what I noticed was, what amazed me was when I looked at the divination process, I saw it was using computer binary code.
Yes.
This was scary because we're talking about people who are not supposed to be sophisticated came up with the idea of using a binary code. Mm-hmm. And not only was it just a binary code, I couldn't believe how accurate. There's nothing you can hide. It penetrates into the psyche, into the very psyche. Right. Jerome, it penetrates into the psyche. If you think you can hide something, you're fooling yourself. Down to sickness, it doesn't matter what it is.
No, and I mean, you mentioned a binary system, but in a sense, really, it's a binary system, but it represents the law of nature and the very secret of life. Because really, rather than just purely a binary system, you could almost liken it to DNA, right? Mm-hmm. The two legs, the two odus that make up the reading in Ifa can be construed or described as the double helix, right? That you need two. Everything in Ifa is paired.
Yes.
You need two odus, two, a mother and father, two that give you the full picture of the person. Ifa's accuracy is because it really looks at the spiritual DNA of the person, and it shows that Ifa is cognizant and can bring out, whether it be your choices, whether it be your preferences, whether it be the challenges you're dealing with, whether it be hidden illnesses or propensities to illness that a person has.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is captured by Ifa. Ifa, quite often we jokingly describe is that when you have a reading of Ifa, it's like having a CT scan, ultrasound, blood work,
Of your
and
mind,
urine
of
sample
your
all in
soul.
one.
Yes.
Right?
Listen to me. This thing, it blew my mind. You know, it blew my mind because I was told something about someone, and I had no idea. They had no anything, and I went and asked them about something, and their jaw fell open, and it was something they were suffering from, an ailment, and they were, "How did you know this about me?" I said, "I don't know. I dreamt it." But, you know, but because I don't want to have to explain everything. And it turned out to be true. To be true. It's like and this is what I find is empowering, is because a lot of people come on earth, you're born on earth, right? And it's a very scary process. They teach you a lot of things about the world, but nobody teaches you about yourself. And that's the thing you have to deal with the most. You try to make up your mind, you don't know what field you should go into because you don't have a idea of what's your purpose here. And to not have a purpose creates a lot of uncertainty, which creates fear.
Correct.
And then creates stress. And that, if it's able to give you direction, and that meaning that it's able to identify in your spirit what nature you carry. You know, what's your nature, what you should be doing. And which is liberating.
It's true. Ifa is very accurate with that. Ifa will tell you, oh, this person's good at this. I mean, you know, like when what you said is true. Many times, you know, career traits, things like that you might be good at, those things will pop, will show up in a divination reading. You know, a lot of those things, it's also, you know, obviously thousands of years ago, which is why, you know, when we talk about like the origins of Ifa and things like this, obviously, if we say, for instance, Ifa was 10,000 years old, were 10,000 years ago, were people chemical engineers? Probably not. Were people civil engineers, things like that? What we term as those things? No.
But listen, but when you look back at history, it seems that all we're doing now in this present stage is confirming what the ancestors knew.
That's my point.
They weren't as people. I don't think they were as stupid as people making. You know, we come up with a lot of fancy language now.
Yes.
That's what I realized. But it lacks substance behind it. We have a lot of fancy words, but they actually, a lot of this is so abstract that you can't explain these things. I think these things have to be best experienced, internalized. This is how so that's why a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't believe in this. And you don't have to believe in anything you don't want to believe, but that don't mean it's not going to affect you.
No, it doesn't.
You
still have an experience. You have an experience of it. You don't have to believe in gravity, but you still experience it.
That's I don't see gravity. I walk off the roof. I don't feel it.
That's right. You feel it immediately.
Well, we talked about, again, origins of Ifa, and we're talking about what you just said, Clyde, about, you know, nowadays we come up with fancy languages. We have to understand that as well. Like if we travel, if we leave the West African area, we even go to documented areas where you see many similarities between Orisha, Ifa, and other basic concepts that were found in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, and you know, Mesopotamia and everything else. Something which we studied a lot with, again, Boko Dafoji and in those areas. But one of the things we talk about, like in Egypt, Imhotep, which was he was a doctor, builder, they found papyrus with treatments for well over 100 different medical conditions, even 3,000 years ago.
Even
3,000
brain,
years ago,
brain surgery.
they were doing brain surgery, neurosurgery,
There's a tribe in Africa.
and with
Still do it.
supposedly some success.
Yes.
So you have to wonder how these exceptional individuals, right? What was the underlying knowledge or experience or wisdom that would permeate.
Like you mentioned the Sumerian. Sumer was the first established civilization on Earth, but very little is taught about it in school. For some reason, they avoid Sumerian history, because Sumerian history speak about gods that came down to Earth and taught man mathematics, everything they know, agriculture, everything, religion.
Which, if you think about it,
yeah,
and that's why when we talk about when we talk about the origins of Ifa and its more global
they speak
presence,
about the same thing come down.
The same thing. Orisha are essentially people that have come down with knowledge in agriculture, iron,
think about
fishing, all these concepts that came down.
I always tell people this: in base, a human being does not invent anything. He's good at innovation. So he has to see something. It has to be something that he sees. Somebody already gave him a start. Because in the basic survival, you're in the forest. You're looking your prime concerns are food, procreation, and shelter.
Yes.
How would you know what's an iron ore nugget? How would you know what temperature you have to smelt it at? It's like men went from the forest to buildings overnight. They went from the forest to buildings, to geometry, to mathematics, to physics overnight.
Astronomy.
Yeah, astronomy.
Observing planetary and again,
Right.
astronomy and planetary movements and everything have also, and the entire sort of solar system do have an influence, especially on the Vodun side, where they really closely follow astronomical and other astrological influences. Maybe less visible today in Yoruba Ifa, but still present, right? So again, you're seeing these influences that cannot be taken for granted or dismissed, right?
Who are the saints?
The Orisha.
Yeah, the Orishas, the saints. Are they? Do they exist inside of us, or are they something separate from us, an entity separate from us?
You want to take that one, or should I?
Or do they make up our nature? Are they part of our? Yeah.
There's a lot of ideas about this, and the reason I say ideas is because depending upon who you ask, people may say similar things, or people may say different things. You mentioned something earlier and said, even within, Christianity, how many different, denominations of Christianity and things like that there are. So the reason I'm saying is to preface it before I answer what you're saying is that even within the Ifa system, you may find many different, what I might refer to as denominations of Ifa. Everybody is all practicing Ifa, right? What they say, okay, this is the system, this is how we're doing it. I can literally go from one village or one house where they worship, say, for instance, Oshun, a certain particular way. They give these particular offerings and so on and so forth, and literally go a couple houses next door and with worshipers who also worship as Oshun, and they might have a different relationship with that same deity and give some different offerings that perhaps the house 2 doors down, they say it's taboo for their lineage of how they worship and what they give to that particular deity. So I'm saying it to preface saying this is based upon what I understand of Ifa, because there's so many different variations and so many different denominations of it and understandings of it, which I think is good because it gives more richness to this, because we're all human beings, all having the same experience on the same earth, but we're all seeing things maybe from a different perspective and from a different viewpoint. So we're having the same experience, which is why I say, like, there's really nothing new under the sun. It's just that we're all here having a different experience of it. All of humanity is we're all experiencing the same things here globally. We just might be interpreting it through our different language and culture and the lens behind how we're raised and where we live and our environment and all those things, that informs how we receive and how we process information, right? So it's difficult to say it's one way, but Ifa says there were what they refer to as irumule, which are like immortal or primordial beings, is what some verses of Ifa say, that they came here from heaven to the earth, right? From Orun to Aye, from heaven to the earth. And they came and they seeded humanity. They had a role in creating human beings. And so some verses of Ifa will say that these various Irumule, Obatala, Shango, various other Irumule, that as human beings were being created and coming into existence here on the earth that they had a hand in, they were able to recognize that maybe this human has more of a trait that's closer to Obatala. This human has traits closer to this other particular Irumule. And so then they trained them in their various mystery schools. So each Orisha, each Irumule has its own like divination system, its own ritual system, its own ceremonies and things that it does that are relative to that particular school. So it's like you have the Ifa system, but then each one of the Orishas or saints, if you want to call them that, all have their own like autonomy and their own variation, their own explanation of how the world came into existence from their point of view. It's like reading the Bible, right? From that perspective, right?
Yeah, in Genesis,
yes.
it speaks about, it's very interesting what you say about all this, the different saints coming together to make man, to seed man.
Yes.
In Genesis, if you read Genesis in the Bible, it says, God said, come, let us make man after our image. Let us, right? It's more than one. And if you look at the Hebrew word for God in the Bible, in Genesis, is Elohim, meaning plural, more than one. So it's a combination.
Correct.
It's not one singular person created man. It's a come let us create man.
Yeah, because the Bible says, right, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God, right? And so then you're talking about the Word, which is doing.
That's what when you start looking deeper, you start seeing a lot of new things.
Yeah, there's a lot. That's my point. Like, there's a lot of overlap. So Ifa just says these Irumule had a hand in this, and so as people learned and developed different areas of speciality within the priesthood and attained a certain level of, say, realization, God realization, spiritual elevation, and so on, they engaged in different acts of filial piety, giving back to the community, made major contributions. In the Catholic Church, they refer to those people as sainting someone, right? Someone dies, they've done all these great acts of humanity. Now the Catholic Church goes in and canonizes this person and says, this person is now going to be Saint so-and-so because they did these particular things. Like, everybody agrees that we've elevated this person spiritually to being someone that we're going to call on, because now they've died. We can call on them to be an intermediary between us and the Creator.
Like Shango.
Similar perspective. Similar, like not the same, but similar.
Like Shango.
Yes.
He was an earthly king. He wasn't one of the ones who descended, right?
Yes. So Ifa is kind of, so Ifa, a lot of the stories, and it depends upon, like, there was more than one Shango. And verses of Ifa will say there was more than one. So there are some verses in Ifa that say that there's no human being that cannot become Orisha. So in other words, what Ifa is saying, that certain people, when they attained a certain level, when they died, their consciousness rose up spiritually to becoming elevated as an Orisha, which is basically like they're an elevated ancestor. So when the Irumule left, these Orisha, or these people who had attained that level, are embodying that particular spiritual matrix.
In the Caribbean,
it's an interconnected relationship.
What we call a spiritual archetype.
Exactly.
They embody a spiritual archetype. That's why in Cuba, the syncretism of the word Santeria, meaning in order to protect their belief system, in order to be able to worship their Orisha, they syncretize, they use Catholic saints that, not arbitrary. And this is a discussion I had with Baba Faseye. People say, oh, the Santos and the syncretism was just something because of Cuba and the slave. No, not 100%. Because the effectiveness of the ability for the belief system to survive thanks to that syncretism, and the choice of our ancestors, or those slaves that actually were very meticulous to choose or saints of the Catholic pantheon that resemble
reflect
characteristics, apataki, esse,
the energy. Yep.
the same. So the effectiveness and the survival and the strength of the Cuban Santeria, and to some extent as well in Brazil of Candomblé, that survivability
You know, the problem
has
lies
been because of that ability to recognize those spiritual archetypes
Correct.
and to understand that the essence of an Orisha, the essence of an Irumale transcends any culture. Right? That's why you have in ancient, Norse mythology, in
Shango.
ancient Greek mythology, in ancient Roman mythology, in ancient Celt or Gaulish mythology, you will have always spiritual archetypes that deal with
The
a
same.
particular characteristic. Ancient Egyptian religion, Sumerian, Babylonian.
When you look at the Vikings, Thor is Shango with the axe, with the pole, with the
hammer.
axe, the hammer. You know, in the Caribbean, I noticed that in my country, Grenada, Trinidad, Shango turned out to be a big player, but also Oshun.
Yeah, you got a Shango Baptist there too, right?
Yes, Oshun. I'll call her Mami Waters, the goddess of the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that turned out to be, it used to have, but it's not so much big anymore. It kind of died. You know, there's still practitioners. In regards to Shango Baptist, it's a bit confusing. They use the Bible, but yet they use some of the rituals. They use the rituals of Ifa.
Orisha, yes, especially Orisha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's it's like everything is I don't know, fused together. I guess it could work because if everything came from one source, if we're dealing with the source of one energy,
I think it speaks a lot to the creativity of mankind, of people's ability to be able to draw from various different sources to be able to address the same thing. Like we're all trying to address the same condition. We're trying to address life and death and birth and families and health. Like, we're all having the same experience of humanity on this planet, and every particular religious system, science, all these different things are trying to find answers to how we live our lives effectively, how we live healthy, how we have wisdom, what's the philosophy behind these particular things. And so, many different cultures will take and say, well, we can use this over here, we can use this over here, we can take this other thing over here, and, combine these things together while they still maybe have their own separate, a philosophy or methodology behind how they work, that you can draw benefit from various things without having to put yourself in a box.
But I noticed that the Caribbean is they picked up a lot of the mystical side of the religion.
Absolutely.
They concentrate more on the magical side instead of concentrating on the philosophical side of Ifa. You being a Babalawo, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You guys have that ability to enter both worlds. The philosophy, you're grounded there. A lot of them, I heard, a lot of the people, when they run into problems, they come to you guys, like even sorcerers or things like that who are doing works, they run into problems, they still have to come to you guys to clarify, to consult the saints, right?
There are some people who do consult babalawos for various things like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let me, if I could take an extract on this one. For instance, in Benin, in Benin and in Togo, where the practice of Vodun and the Honunga, which is the priest of the particular Vodun, which usually will divine through possession or through other divinatory like Obi or Ogbon or different like coconuts or Obi Abata, Kolana, etc. When they have, like very much like an Olorisha or another practitioner, they have their own personal lineage or divinity. It could be Hevioso, it could be Sakpata in Vodun, it could be on the Orisha side, Shango, Oshun. Or they could have their personal spirit or Joto, guiding spirit that basically informs them or tells them, or they do divination through that guiding spirit. But for instance, in Benin, it was known in among the Fon and Ewe, and especially in the kingdom of Dahomey, that regardless of the fact that you might be a honunga or you may have your personal spirit and all, any important decision, choosing a king, a marriage, questions about agriculture, questions about going to war, they were always consulted by the Fa. The Fa was considered especially in many as the supreme oracle, the supreme, essentially the one that would never lie to you, the one that could see everything and never lie to you. Right? It was spirit of high elevation. That's why if we use Judeo-Christian terminology, it was almost considered that the word of Ifa was the word of God, the word of Olodumare, that it was the expression of the supreme being of Ifa that was, as Baba Faseye alluded to in Christian lore, before God there was the word. That word, that consciousness, that knowledge, if we were to take it in as an archetype and transpose or use it for its equivalency in Ifa or Isa, would be Ifa, would be that compendium of Ifa, the wisdom, the knowledge of Olodumare and Ori. Ori being, for Western Judeo-Christian belief, the soul, the repository of God's grace, of God's energy, of the divine in the human being.
Concerning witchcraft, what do you call witchcraft? Some people say obia, stuff. A lot of people come under a lot of spiritual attacks. The people who do these things, are they using earth spirits? What spirits do they use to attack other people?
We definitely don't have enough time for this interview. that has a number of variants, right? Also, because obia, like if you've mentioned the word, I think it's important for people listening to understand that things like obia, palo, all these different belief systems, terms that are generically used to describe the use of medicine. Medicine can be the same way medicine can save, medicine can kill. The same way you can use a spirit for good, you can find spirits that can be used for bad. Obia is a compendium of belief systems that stem from everywhere from the Bantu, from the area, that believe in Nkisi and Palo, and practice with a Nganga or Waganga, all the way to mixes of medicines and all that taken from other ethnic groups like the Fon, the Ewe, even the Yoruba.
Exactly.
So, but again, more looking at the essence of your question is that everything, and that's why we look at Ifa is very much or has similar concept to even Taoist yin and yang theory. Everything is composed of light and darkness. The goal of Ifa in terms of destiny is to find equilibrium in your destiny and be in alignment with that destiny you chose in heaven. In keeping with that, it is understood that nobody is all light, all dark. Nobody is all good or all evil. There is a blend or balance, an equilibrium where a person may do more evil than good or more good than evil, but we all have. Nobody is in one polarity or the other. So it's the same way, and there are many groups that have been publishing of that, like, when referring to voodoo or any of these belief systems, it's like a knife. A knife in the hands of a surgeon can save a life. A knife in the hands of a killer can take a life. The issue is not the science or the spirituality or the belief system. It is the human being and their expression and their choices they make, the free will to execute for the good or to execute for the bad.
So if someone came to you to do evil against someone, would you guys do that?
I mean, speaking for myself, it is, again, it's a personal choice. The thing is, people talk about, oh, I will do this evil, I will do that evil. It doesn't work that way. For everyone listening to me right now, when you have somebody that says, oh, I could do this, I will do that evil and that, be wary, because it comes at a price, because the universe always has its checks and balances.
Right.
And if you take a life, you're going to have to give a life. Okay, the same way when we do a bo or offerings to save somebody, and then we do an animal sacrifice to take the life of an animal to restore health, to restore prosperity, to restore clarity or to restore purpose in life, we always say, I know for myself, and I'm sure as well Baba Faseye, do not take that sacrifice lightly, because a sacrifice is being made to restore balance in your life by divine will, by the word of Ifa. Do not take it lightly, because when you take a life, there's always a cost for it. That's why you have to, be conscious of that sacrifice. There are orders of Ifa that say that for every life or every animal taken in this world, you confront them in the afterlife, in the Inoru. They're presented and lined up to say, I died for you, so you better have made it worth my my death, right? And for people that do bad, they have to understand, if you do bad through obia, palo, and all that, if you take a life, the very force that you use, the very energies that you use to take that life, you have to know that quite often, especially in Cuba, palero, the people that practice palo or practice any type of man, they would know, and they would tell this their disciple or their students or their godchildren, that they have to understand that when you do expend those energies to do harm, quite often a member of the family of the person, of the priest that was doing, would lose their life, or would be visited a terrible tragedy. So you have to be very careful, because the universe is we are, as priests, if we are to do our work properly, we are only messengers. We are only instruments of the divine. We do not control the divine.
That's correct.
Right? And so that's why when a Babalao does Ebo, even to save a life, not even to do harm, but to save a life, we often have to do Ebo for ourselves, because Ifa said, well, you've dispensed this energy, you took death away from this person, death is still looking for maybe somebody. You understand? So that's why we often have to do Ebo to rectify. And how much more would you have to do Ebo, cleansing, atonement, if you take a life of an innocent person, a person for which you didn't have the right to take the life, or do harm?
It's very strange if you read the in the Old Testament or the Torah, you heard there's a sorcerer named Balaam. Balaam. He was one of the most powerful sorcerers. That he was going to put a curse. The king paid him money to put a curse on Israel. That one man was going to put a curse. That God Himself had to intervene and have him change the curse into a blessing. So it shows you that, and even if you look, it shows you that there was a lot of powers involved there. There was another particular fight where Israel was fighting against a king. And I can't remember the exact part, but that king, when he realized the battle was turned against him, he took his firstborn son and killed him on the wall. And they said a certain energy arose and Israel had to run. But they never described what force, what was the force that came. So I see blood sacrifice has always been used, even what they call a scapegoat. Every year the king will come.
It's just maybe known as something different, but it's still going on today.
So I'll give you two examples, if I may. So going back to the Bible and going to current practices. In the Bible, Old Testament, Abraham is told by God to sacrifice his son if he truly believed in God. At the last moment, God says, "Stay thy hand. You have shown your devotion and your love of God. The true sacrifice is in the bushes." And the true sacrifice was a lamb, to be sacrificed to God. Those sacrifices have still survived today. The Jewish, especially Hasidic Jews, have a ceremony called kaparot, which is the same as we do with the cleansing of a chicken, to clean sins away from the person and then sacrifice. In Hinduism, they sacrifice goats and all, because these are not religious vows. These are basically belief systems that describe the supernatural laws, checks and balances that exist. The same way we have the laws of gravity, we have the laws of checks and balance of life for life, of equilibrium in the universe.
Correct.
Right? So these are not, something which we, because I believe this. No, you'll find them across every belief system, across all of time, and across every region of the earth.
Oh.
That's the law of reciprocity, right?
Absolutely.
That's the law of reciprocity. If you do something, and there has to be equally some other there has to be some other side effect, right? That's cause
Nothing
and
free.
effect.
No voids, and there can't be any voids. It always be filled.
Right. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? That's also Newton's law, right? It's the same thing.
Yep.
The
We're talking
idea
about physics. It's the same thing.
the idea that nature abhors a vacuum, right? The idea that when
Yeah.
something is void, something will come to fill it.
Something has to fill that space.
That's
It
right.
refuses to let anything remain empty.
That's
Right.
When people get a reading by you guys, and the saints recommend a certain ritual or cleansing, is there anything that comes back to them for that taking of that, the life of the animal that's
No, not in that sense. But so here's the condition.
Mhm.
If the person, if you do the ebo, for let's say the person has made some mistakes or has had, let's be very polite, has had indiscreet behavior that has led to some sort of health complication. We'll leave it at that. And you tell them, right? Because Ifa and a reading is both advice and ebo, right? The two legs, always in pairs. There's always an advice that goes with the ebo. If you do the ebo but don't listen to the advice, you're going to be in the same boat in a few months.
Correct.
If you listen to the advice and you do the ebo, you're in alignment with your destiny and you're in alignment with the word of Ifa, the word of Ifalodun. There is no stain on the person, because that is something which has been prescribed by Almighty to bring balance, to bring order back into the life of that person. How we all have free will, which in Yoruba, the closest it would be akunlegba, the ability to change, to make free choices and everything else.
Mm.
If you choose to go back into the same thing, going contrary to your destiny, going contrary to the advice of your father, you're going to be in the same boat. And then you may have a stain for what you've done, because you've basically taken a sacrifice in vain.
Because every ebo comes with some sort of behavior. Many times it will come with some sort of recommendation for behavior modification, something within your character, something within how you conduct yourself, how you're living your life, that you can make some amendments with, you can make some changes with. So if you just go and you indiscriminately, say, for instance, see a babalao or somebody who's a priest or priestess in this tradition to have work done, and the divination recommends that there's some behavior pattern that you need to make amends with, and you refuse to do that, well, then your hands are stained with the blood of this animal that you have had sacrificed, because the life of that animal was sacrificed in vain, because you've only made half the sacrifice, right? You've done the physical sacrifice, but the inner work you haven't done anything about. So that means it was a waste of time. So many times this is why Ifa will give these recommendations of things, is because if you're going to make that step of doing that particular ritual or whatever that sacrifice is, then whatever recommendation you're asked to do, you should likewise you should follow it through it and not do it halfway. This way you get the maximum benefit. You know, it's like being told, hey, you get in the car, you drive the car like this and this. When you get to a stop sign, you stop at the stop sign, and so on and so forth. You get to a green light, you can go. We know how we're told to operate in traffic. If you go and you buy an expensive car, you buy a Cadillac, and you decide to just drive the car however you feel like it rather than following the rules of the road, then why did you spend that much money in that type of a vehicle if you're going to drive it this recklessly? Right? That doesn't make any sense. So it's a similar philosophy and outlook, even within Ifa, when it comes to making sacrifices and things like that.
Can I ask you a question? How long have you been a practitioner?
I got exposed to the Ifa tradition in 2001, 2002 was when I was first exposed to, when I first began to practice and I first was exposed to it. So it's been a little bit.
I must say, listen, I read extensively, and religion, since I was 12 years old, I knew I knew the things that I don't know, that, how should I put it? I knew that the world was more than it appears to be, to naturalize. I've seen many things in my life. I do believe my life was meant to have a spiritual calling. I've always known that, because nothing else gives me satisfaction. It doesn't matter how much money I make. It doesn't matter nothing. Whatever I have, it does not bring a satisfaction unless I'm discussing, speaking about spirituality, about discussing ideas, things like that.
Of course.
So a lot of people speak to me and about things that they feel afflicted with. Some I try to always make sure that it's not medical. It's not, you know, I don't know, bad thinking or whatever. Before, you know, I look at spiritual things. But a lot of people say that they're afflicted these days with, they feel like they're under attack. They feel a heaviness, a cloudiness, a darkness. That some can be spiritual, some can be stress of life and stuff like that.
Sure.
How would you, can people like that come to you guys for advice, for help?
Absolutely. Many times people will come. I mean, I'll have people sometimes that contact me that just say, I'm in a really dark place in my life and I don't know what to do.
100%.
I have no direction. Many times sometimes I will receive a message from someone that may just contact me, you know, for a reading. And that's literally like, that's all they'll write. It's just that my life is lacking direction. Something is off. I don't know what it is, you know? So, you know, the divination will be able to assess, you know, what all is going on, you know, in a person's life and things like that. You know, this is what I will say about the Ifa system, is that a good priest is also a good listener. You know, many times people come in life and they need to have divination done or whatever it is, if we're just talking about it from Ifa spiritual system or whatever. And we can certainly do a reading and tell a person this is what's going on in your life and so on and so forth. But people also need to be able to be heard. You know, to be a good priest, you have to be a good listener. Sometimes people they need to be able to unpackage what they have going on, to be able to unburden themselves about what's going on in their life, what's troubling them, what's bothering. It's good. Yes, we present solutions and things of that nature. Well, you know, Ifa will give a recommendation for things like that. But as well, we also have to change or modify or elevate a person's relationship to whatever it is that's troubling them. So this is the purpose as well, if things like initiation and certain rituals and things of that nature. Yes, ritually and magically and metaphysically, of course, we know it has an effect. But if the person's mind and their spirit and what's going on inside of them, you haven't raised that consciousness and given them some hope and some relief, even if it's just somebody who's listened to them. Because it's like going to see a doctor. People see doctors every day. How much time do you give the doctor to really talk about what's going on? You get into the doctor's office, hey, what's going on? He checks you out. That's it, you're in and you're out. People say, man, this doctor just seems like you don't have any time for me. Yeah. So it's a similar perspective. And I'm not saying that priests aren't listening. I'm just simply saying that people, in addition to getting whatever is ailing them, also need to feel like somebody has a vested care in what's going on, and that whatever they're feeling, that it can be aired out. So, you know, so there's multiple components to being able to address these things, is being heard, being in a safe place where you can share whatever it is that's going on, being able to unburden that, because now, you know, your mind and your spirit is in a different place as we're treating. And we know this from Western medical science. You know, so how many tests have they done with placebo drugs? The doctor just says, hey, you're going to take this and so on and so forth, and you're going to get better. And yet there was nothing there, right? But you've changed the person's relationship to what it is that's ailing them. And the body now begins to do what it's designed to do, which is to bring itself back to a state of homeostasis, which means that the body is bringing itself back to its natural alignment of how it was created to operate and to work. Ritual and things like this inside of Ifa has a similar function as well, in a spiritual perspective, in a context as well. It's not just you come in, we give you a whole prescription of different things, but it's multiple things that are all happening simultaneously. That's what's bringing about this change in a person's life.
Listen to me,
if I could just add one little comment to that, because Baba Faseye is bang on. But one of the biggest challenges as well is when you know, I have people that come to Ifa from every religious background, everything from Pentecostal to Baptist to Jewish to Hindu, you know, every belief system in the world. And one of the biggest challenges as well is being brought up in certain belief systems that are more, let's say, dogmatic or canonic in nature, where it's one size fits all, where these universal laws. But one of the biggest challenges is to bridge the gap in the consciousness to understand that the Ifa and the spiritual belief system Ifa is based on the individuality of the person. Yes, there are communal, societal responsibilities and interconnection relationships, but that one size does not fit all. That Ifa also is one of the biggest things I tell clients. It says while many belief systems are, in terms, if we use technology terms, is unidirection. In other words, you're praying, you're offering, and you're waiting for a miracle. You're waiting for a sign. Ifa is not like that. Ifa represents a real-time, bi-directional conversation, challenge, response, that gives immediate insight into a situation, no matter what spiritual belief system you have, no matter what nationality you have, no matter what color of skin, no matter what part of the world you come from. Ifa sees exactly who you are and what you are. But sometimes, as Baba Faseye, one of the biggest challenges is getting people to overcome those limiting beliefs that have been imposed on them. And many, one of the reasons why many, especially from the West Africa and even talk about spiritual colonialism, right? The fact that not only have they, have these countries and ethnic groups been colonized in one shape or even colonized in the New World, but that they have robbed you and supplanted your individual. We started saying this at the beginning with Baba Faseye's term.
Spiritual DNA.
They basically have implanted a constrictive belief system for control. As you started to say, we have to understand, even not to single out any one belief system, but the current belief system and the current canon law, using the word canon law, that is enacted by the Catholic Church, was developed by the Church of Constantinople when Emperor Constantine made the Catholic or the Christian religion the religion of the empire. For what? Not for altruistic reason, because he had an enlightenment of soul and Christian virtue and value, but because he wanted to control, because it is easier to control an empire with one belief system. And you're equated to being the head of that belief system, rather than have multiple belief systems, multiple wizards, multiple people doing divination, multiple individual thoughts, right? It's the same as Islam. Islam, the Quran is the authority. Like, it is one canon, one word that basically governs all. Ifa's not like that.
And in the Catholic Church, it would have been a heretic. In the Muslim religion, infidel. Both are punishable by death.
Exactly.
What I noticed about when the Europeans colonized places is that they always had a Jesuit priest, which is like the soldiers of the church. Brilliant men, but they're after one thing. Everyone else run off looking for gold. They come for the minds of the people. Convert or die. When everyone else is running for gold, they convert these people. They sit in the church and they bring the gold to them. They don't have to go digging the gold or wasting anything. The soldiers who loot the gold will bring the gold for them. So, and they always rule the people that they couldn't control or wouldn't change their religious system, they kill them. Because at the end of the day, it's about control. If I control your mind, your beliefs, everything.
Let's not go too far. I mean, and then again, the purpose of this interview is not to single out or to be critics of other belief systems. Everybody has the right to believe what they believe. Though I want to make it clear that as you preface this conversation, that part of the reason why Ifa and other indigenous belief systems are vilified, are described as being evil, satanic, all these terms, are from institutional religions that felt fear and threatened by the individual nature and the veracity of these systems in terms of seeing what was truly going on. If we look at Cuba, You made an earlier comment at the beginning about the mix of indigenous, like First Nations belief systems with those of the African slaves that came over. In Cuba, they didn't get the chance. The Taínos were exterminated by the Spanish. Exterminated by the Spanish. And Atwe, which is a famous Indian where there's a statue in Cuba, basically said one thing. At the moment he was going to be burned alive, because he did not want to convert, he had his own mind, he could see what was going on. The priest said, "Convert, my son, because that way you can go to heaven." And he asked, which is immortalized, "Are all of you that are killing, stealing, and raping our lands and our people and doing this to me going to that place called heaven?"
I don't want to go.
If you are, I'm not going. So for all of those that that's something else that should not be burned. It should open your eyes. The only thing Ifa does in this belief system is open the eyes so you can see the veracity, the real situation behind people's motivations, people's situations, and everything else. Right?
It gives you a self-empowerment. It makes you not afraid of anything.
100%.
You're not afraid. You don't worry about if you're gonna get blocked here because of your color or your idea. It doesn't matter. It's like it opens up. What is for you is for you. There's nothing to stop. It gives you a freedom. It's a power you're not intimidated by anyone. That's the beautiful thing. It gives you a power of not being intimidated, because you can meet, it could be the king, it could be a pope, it doesn't matter what. You see people for who they are. I don't know. But since I was young, I always saw people for who they were. So,
part, and I'm just going to add to what you're saying. Part of that happens as well with helping people to have clarity and see what's really going on, and being able to see that which is unrevealed, right? Because we talk about readings, we're talking about casting an Odu or sign. Odu referring to dark matter conscious. We're seeing what we can't perceive with the own eyes. But part of what people see in Ifa and the ability to be able to get that type of clarity is also connected with the state of elevation, inner work, consciousness, and the humanity and compassion of the diviner and the priest or priestess who's doing the reading. Not everybody who goes and gets a reading in Ifa comes out of it with this same type of clarity and understanding and wisdom and perspective. We're talking about human beings here. In Christianity, some people could go to Christianity. You have things like bibliomancy. You familiar with bibliomancy? You go in, somebody, and many of my family did this, so this is why I'm saying this. I have aunts and uncles that were ministers in the church. They open the Bible and do a divination from scriptures and passages that were inside of the Bible. So what I'm saying is there are many spiritual traditions out there that people are able to get this type of insight and wisdom and perspective into what's happening in their life. Ifa has a very profound and very powerful way of being able to address that. But I only say this just to say that it's also about the inner work and the development of the priest or priestess who's done the reading, because the divination is only as good. The truth is that a divination reading is only as good as the diviner's ability to be able to give an unbiased insight into what the reading itself actually has to say about what's going on inside of a person's life outside of their own personal preferences and or prejudices. If you're doing a reading for somebody and you have an automatic prejudice against people who are Christian or Muslim, whatever else, then that's going to taint your view about how you speak. It's the same thing. You go in and you go see a doctor. African Americans are known in America for being a large group of people that, for the most part, we don't trust the medical establishment. Well, we have a good reason, because there's been medical apartheid that's been happening to African peoples for generations. And so we've known that many times we go see doctors, they don't always give us the complete truth, or we have to be concerned with what they're giving us, whether or not they're really giving us the proper medicine. So I'm saying this from the perspective of we also want to make dealing with, whether it's Christian or it's Ifa or it's Islam or whatever else, it's also about going and seeing a balanced, healthy practitioner of whatever their particular faith or belief system is. That's how you get the most out of whatever it is that your spiritual practice is, by finding balanced, healthy community and balanced, healthy individuals to be able to gain more insight and to get more tools to be able to live your life in a balanced way. Ifa has many tools to be able to do that, but a lot of systems also have that as well, you know, depending on where you're coming from.
I know someone who went to see Jerome, and I have witnessed the miraculous in their life.
Absolutely.
The miraculous. You know, they can't stop thanking him. It's a 360. A 360. A 360 turn around, and it's amazing. It's like I'm witnessing like I'm in a dream. It's because it's like everything changed.
Mm-hmm.
Like a total 360, and it just didn't happen. It happened overnight, but because I guess the person has Oya, which is like that. That's a very powerful. Nobody messes with Oya.
Well, and thanks to Baba Faseye for facilitating that, finding that icon in that particular instance, without going into details, but for facilitating that particular icon. It was thanks to Baba Faseye, you know, basically, and it brings up another point again, the collaboration. A lot of it, as Baba Faseye talks about, is, you know, your mindset, your point of view. Both one of the reasons Baba Faseye and a few other Babalaos we deal with, we have a good understanding and long-term relationship, and you know, I've dealt with many people's situations and so forth, because again, we talk about community and the support of Babalao, you know, is always good to have a community behind him, other Awos, other Olu, other people that have different experience and different knowledge, different depth in areas that we can pool on, like any profession. You know, they can basically rely on that person to back them up, right? That's why when we first started this conversation, I believe many of my fellow practitioners would say that Ifa is not, and the belief system is not a religion as such, again, because we've described it's not canonic, it's not just single culture. It is really a spiritual belief system, and it is something which basically transcends any particular religion, cultural backdrop, and everything else. And it's more, and I often liken the practice of most Babalaos to be not so much as, you know, typical have you temple or preach and everything, but no, we are really our position, at least in my practice, I believe that Baba Faseye and others agree, is really our hope is to really to exemplify and to be able to provide that help, that spiritual guidance and help, but much the same way that you would go to a doctor for, you know, any type of Western doctor for support or help in terms of dealing with any type of situation where things are not going well, except our mandate and our scope is far broader because it deals with the spiritual, physical, emotional, psychological realms, whereby we may refer to others in their respective disciplines, depending on what the person needs. But, you know, again, that is really, when people go to a Babalao, is, you know, it's really dealing with a professional person which understands, can listen, has studied, invested themselves in the divinatory art and science, and is humble enough to also, when they don't have the answer, when they feel that they've really wrong, they can reach out to the broader community to be able to address issues.
And that's where I give you respect. That's where you earn the highest respect, was and the point when you said you're unsure, you're gonna refer it, you're gonna sound it off against Oba and stuff like that. And you know, it wasn't one of those you know, charlatan, you know, there's a lot of people, that's what people understand. And a lot of people get the wrong, because they go to charlatans and and they get the wrong, you know, they're just after money and stuff like that. They say, yeah, we know everything, we know everything, we know everything. You never at one time claim to know everything, and you always refer things back, you know, to get a song did. Even if you were you weren't 100% certain, you said, you know what, I'll get back to you. I'll do this. And this is unheard of in these times. You know,
well, thank you
you don't
for
get
that.
people. You don't have people with that type of integrity.
But Oba is the same way. I mean, he's made 27 trips to Africa for prolonged periods of time, been initiated in many different. He's gone through a lot of sacrifice, both financial, family, and all that to follow his journey. I have my own challenge, my own investments and time and effort and ceremonies and challenges. But again, in spite of those numerous trips, we are like-minded in the sense that if our interest is to help an individual, we must be honest with ourselves and Ifa. Actually, it's not even that it is if a Babalao truly follows the 16 commandments, the 16 guidelines of the Odun Ikafu, a Babalao should not do or engage or say he knows, he doesn't know, or lead people through the wrong path. That is a commandment within Ikafu, within the course of Ifa.
That's correct.
Right, but one which is often ignored or thrown in the dumpster or the background because sometimes it's not convenient, right?
Wow. So how do Oba, you're in South Florida.
Yes.
If someone wants to reach you for reading, how do they go about that?
They can reach me on my website. My website is www.oracleifa.com. They can reach me on my website there. You know, we have a form where people can send information and they can contact us through there if they want to have a reading, or they can call.
It doesn't matter if they're in a different country or anything, right?
Yeah, from any country, or they can send me an email, oracleifa@gmail.com. People can contact me there as well, or you can contact me as well through my cell, which is 305-981-6135. You know, my website's been up for years. I've had the website up for maybe 12 years now.
Okay.
So, I have a lot of people. We have a lot of folks that contact us from various parts of the world. You know, people in different places that are just, looking for tools and resources to be able to, enhance the quality of their life. So.
And Jerome, what about you?
Well, again, I practice here in Canada. I work in collaboration with Oba Faseye, and we oftentimes, as you've seen from firsthand, we help each other, support each other in terms of our practices and the people that come to us for assistance. Here we have our website, which is consejoculturalyoruba.ca. And you can find us on Facebook with the same consejoculturalyoruba.ca. My name again is Jean-Jerome Baudry, Ifalodun. You're also welcome to email me at jjbaudry, Baudry, at consejoculturalyoruba.ca. Or call or contact me at our cell 647-770-2086. And would be happy. Again, this is family. So, if somebody wants to speak specifically to myself, but reaches Oba Faseye will consult and let me know. Absolutely. Same thing here. If somebody wants to reach Oba Faseye and they've come through me, again, at the end of the day, what we're looking at is that the right person, the right mix, and the right knowledge be put on. And quite often we work in collaboration as well with another Babalao, another organization called Baba Ifabi, Baba Nelson Alvarez from Ifa World Conference. Both Baba Oba Faseye and myself belong to the Ifa World Conference and collaborate in terms of rescuing and collecting essay Ifa and knowledge from Nigeria, where we contribute financially to the communities to rescue information, essays Ifa, to codify them so that we can enrich the practice in the diaspora, but while also giving back to the community, and specifically Lagos in Nigeria, which the community there of Babalaos has been exceedingly cooperative and helpful, and we have a very good relationship. One thing I want to mention, because this is something which came up recently this week, Ifa is like any medical medical degree and all that, is a constant study and a constant investment by practitioners. Quite often, one of the biggest challenges is people say Ifa or Orisha or West African belief systems are an expensive practice. The challenge is that both from an initiatory standpoint, meaning the labor, the animals, the ingredients required, but also from a learning aspect, none of this learning has ever come for free, right? And unfortunately, when we give back to the community, when we ask our elders, whether it be in Nigeria, Benin, or anywhere else, to exchange knowledge with us in order to then enrich our practice and help others, quite often we have to make substantial investments to do that. From our standpoint, and that's why I liken it to doctors, we believe, and I ascribe to, Faseye ascribes to, Nelson ascribes as to other, to a transparency in terms of charging for that service, charging for those ebos, charging for that knowledge transfer, but doing so above board. Because quite often, people in this tradition, because of if we look again at a Catholic or Christian, scenario, there's a belief that going to church or belonging to a particular church group, that spiritual knowledge and all that is exchanged for free. But oftentimes it's not.
It's not.
That knowledge comes at a hefty price. And if we look at the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church has something called the Vatican Bank. The Vatican Bank wasn't built up or financed by God's good graces, but by the backs and the monies from lands and places, one way voluntarily or many times involuntarily, quite tragically, contributed to those coffers.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be mindful that Ifa recognizes that there's a role for money, for Ajay to play in this world, and the only thing is how we work with that money and how we interact with that force which is money, which essentially does make things move in this world. Our choice is not to do things, or to say everything is going to be free, this, that, no, but then expecting a bigger payback or some sort of control or claim on the person's life, destiny, or assets, but to be transparent and say, we need to do this work. This is how much it's going to cost. This is the reason why, and this is how we go forward. I wanted to make that clear because we've seen some misinformation and things circulating sometimes, only lays, and again, for everybody to see publicly that these belief systems, the only thing you could ask, you have a right to ask for, is for transparency and for honesty in terms of what's being done, why it's being done, and so forth. But to understand that these rituals and this knowledge does not come at zero financial cost, that there may be, tempered by situation, all that, a financial cost involved, and that there is sometimes a big investment to change or to shape your life. The same way, I was saying many times, I wish we had, like we have in Canada, a public health system which covered IFA, EBOs, and IFA consultations, right? Like at IFA OHIP or at IFA Obamacare or universal health care. But unfortunately, we don't. And if we don't recognize, if we don't make sure that we charge what is correct or what is just in a transparent fashion, we would not be able to do what we do, because
you wouldn't be able to operate.
We wouldn't be able to operate. Right?
No church will be able to operate without money. No church today
absolutely
can operate without money. So
right. So yeah, I just wanted to make that little comment because it's definitely, I think it's timely, especially in this conversation as well, right?
Yeah, because I heard so many sad stories about people going and taking advantage of, because as I said, there's a lot of charlatans out there. They give people, they don't tell them the truth. Some of these people can't even read anything, they use people, they abuse people, and this also, and then people go with the bad feelings and the anger, and say, just cover the whole place cover every practitioner with it, and say that they're bad, they're evil, and things like that. They're no good, they're scammers and stuff like that. Oh, no, it doesn't exist. You don't know. I tell people when it comes to spirituality, there's no way to explain it. This thing is something you have to witness yourself, and for you to witness, you have to observe it, see it, feel it, try it in your life, and you'll
People
see
have
what
to
happens.
experience it. What you're saying is true. You know, there are a lot of people in any walk of life, Christianity, Islam, even in Ifa. There are people who like to come out and say, oh, this person's no good. I don't like this person's a fraud. They're a charlatan. They're this or that. And it's, you know, and people form their opinions based upon those things. You know, at the end of the day, people have to go out and you have to go out and meet people. If you hear something bad about somebody else or something that's off or whatever else, people have to go out and go and meet these individuals and talk to them or go investigate on their own rather than just taking things of just being said just off of just what somebody, you know, somebody else in any profession. You get people that say, this guy's a bad painter. I had this guy, I hired him and he didn't do a good job because this and this. That's someone else's particular point of view. Everybody is someone's hero or someone's antagonist in the story, depending upon who you ask. So
sometimes again, you know, you have to see that Ifa speaks about truth, is transparency and everything else. Sometimes people don't like what they hear. Right. And sometimes I've had people that haven't talked to me for a year because Ifa told them certain things were going to happen. And then I hear from them a year later when everything, you know, proverbially hit the rotating blades, to not be impolite. And, you know, and they say, I didn't call you back. I didn't know it because I didn't like what I heard. You know, I didn't see it.
Truth is cold.
Truth is cold.
Truth
And unfortunately,
is cold.
and unfortunately, Ifa is not a popularity contest. I mean, you know, we have a moral and spiritual obligation to tell it the way it is. I mean, we don't have to be, you know, brutish or impolite or rude or callous in delivering the news, but we have to be for that. And sometimes people won't accept it. Sometimes people are so caught up in their own view of their own situation, who they are and who they, you know, that they do not want to admit what the situation being presented to them is.
Interesting. I was going to say, well, I want to thank you, gentlemen, because you've been on. I don't want to keep you all back, but I want to thank every one of you for, you know, contributing today, trying to clear up a lot of misconceptions in regards to Ifa. Everyone, if anyone wants to contact them, you can send me a message or whatever. I'll be glad to get their information and put you onto them. All right.
Thank you, Clyde. We appreciate. I appreciate personally, and I'm sure Oba as well. He'll speak for himself. We appreciate your time and really coming to us with the opportunity to speak live to your community and to the community at large. And I hope this won't be this was definitely our first, and hopefully it won't be our last.
Oh my God!
Because there's so many topics, so many interesting topics and areas where I think people really will probably want more information on.
Yes.
And I want to let you know that I believe we are definitely both very interested and available. If you ever want to do another one of these Zoom/Facebook lives, we'd be happy to participate and do them with you and maybe touch on more in depth another subject matter or other areas that people want to explore.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I will get some feedback, and according to what people say to me, then we can probably discuss that, and we can put another schedule together and discuss it.
Ashe. Ashe.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much. You have a blessed day. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.